Hello, this is Stuart Address for Ask a Lawyer, June 22nd, 24th, actually, 2022. I said the 22nd because my mother celebrated a birthday this week. So happy birthday, Mom. She's listening and watching on Facebook. And we're going to sort of continue with our discussion from last week because the 5 hours of congressional testimony this week was just, to me, fascinating and horrifying simultaneously. And there's no better interaction of law and politics and the potential end of our constitutional democracy. So I'm going to start generally by noting that what I gathered from this week's hearings was that simultaneously, President Trump was endeavoring to overturn the results of the election through the vice president, through state officials, through poll workers, through utilization of the Attorney General and the Department of Justice. And all these plans were detailed, organized, and there is no way that they could have been done in sync at all levels without President Trump's coordination. Now, I'll tell you that most jarring to me was the effort and the pressure that President Trump placed on the Department of Justice.
Yeah, I think yesterday got my attention.
I hope yesterday got a lot of people's attention. And we're going to talk about why it should have and why it might not have. We're going to have psychology and the law intersect and see where we go. But in addition, Attorney General Barr told President Trump that all his theories of fraud were without merit, were baseless. He told them they were crazy, and he said they were bleep, bleep. Okay. Surprisingly, Attorney General Barr ended up having to resign. So what we had then was Deputy Attorney General Rosen became acting Attorney General, and this other Assistant Deputy Attorney General Clark moved up a spot to acting Deputy Attorney General. And third in line was the head of the Civil Division for the Department of Justice, an environmental lawyer named Jeffrey Clark. So, what was described yesterday.
By the way, did that environmental lawyer get his law degree at Sears?
That environmental lawyer may have obtained his law degree from the University of Paraguay.
Kmart.
What was described yesterday was a series of meetings in the Oval Office, of telephone calls to the Department of Justice, all going over and over and over the same material, but which was described as each time President Trump was more agitated and more aggressive. And you have to do this, you have to do that. At one point, he told Acting Attorney General Rosen, just say the election was fraudulent and leave the rest to me and my Republican colleagues in the Congress. So when he was told the investigation had been done and had shown nothing, he even abandoned the push for an investigation. He said, just say it was fraudulent. And let me handle the rest, because he had a plan with his loyalists in Congress. Another effort that was attempted and almost led to the equivalent of Watergate's Saturday Night Massacre, where the Attorney General and another both resigned in the face of pressure from Richard Nixon. But what happened here was, in addition to all of these efforts to investigate a whole bunch of cockamamie theories, none of which proved out, and in addition to the pressure to just declare the election was fraudulent, let me handle it. And there was also an effort to send a letter, which was drafted either by Mayor Giuliani or someone else and given to the Department of Justice, a letter which said that there appeared to be indicators of fraud and recommending that several different state legislators convene a special session of the legislature to consider presenting an alternate slate of electors to the Congress, obviously a slate that favored Trump in states where Joe Biden had won.
Okay, just a second,
Yeah.
Stuart. NBC is reporting Supreme Court is overturning Roe v. Wade.
Oh my God.
They have a special report on the air right now. So it doesn't have the vote tally yet.
It's 6-3.
But yeah, it's they've made a decision on the Mississippi case.
Well, as I said over a year ago, I believe that the signs were there that Roe versus Wade would be overturned. It has been overturned. It's like, which news story do you discuss? How many news stories can people absorb? The impact of overturning Roe versus Wade is going to be monumental and cataclysmic. I guess maybe we'll talk about that next week, but it pains me. You know, I am pro-choice, but individually, I'm against abortion. But my individual view should have nothing to do with my political view. What is best for the country and for women is not necessarily what I believe. Yet that is no longer the law of the land. And with that, we go to Charlie on the phone.
Hello, Stuart.
Hi there.
Good morning. I do agree with you on the abortion issue, by the way. The thing that I wanted to throw at you was this. Have you ever tried a case where there wasn't the other party had a defense? Because what's going on with this January 6th deal, you know, there are two Republicans, but they're really against Trump.
Hey, that's the Republicans'
There's
fault.
no defense.
That's the Republicans' fault that they didn't want to be on the committee. So let's not
No, no.
let's not go there.
Nancy Pelosi refused, Stuart. She
Oh, that's
refused.
not true. That is not
That
true.
is true.
It's not.
Well, okay. We
not.
agree to disagree, I guess.
All right. We can agree to disagree.
All right. I'm going to get off the phone because I do love your show.
Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate it. All right. I don't agree with that. I'm glad he agrees with me on abortion. And yes, I have tried cases where there have been defenses. Indeed, I have not tried a single case where there wasn't a defense. But, you know, Charlie's point is that there's no defense to Trump in the hearings. And I say that's Trump's own fault. That's Congress's own fault. That's Kevin McCarthy's fault. We wanted an independent investigation, independent of Democrats and Republicans. and the Republicans said no. And we suggested ways for this to be a joint committee, and there were disputes over that, and ultimately there were efforts that were made that were rejected by the Democrats and led us to proceed in this way with 2 Republicans. Anyway, what I was saying before was, if these letters had been sent, then perhaps there would have been alternate slates of electors submitted to Congress. And when the time came on January 6th to tabulate the vote, the vice president would have had an issue as to which slates of electors to accept. And there, perhaps, he might have found the ability to side with Trump as the most recent slate or something else. In fact, something that I discovered and learned this week, along with many others, was particularly insidious. Apparently, Senator Ron Johnson, a Republican of Wisconsin, through Representative Mike Kelly, Republican, tried to hand up a sealed envelope to Vice President Pence on January 6th during the counting. And apparently this came through the chief of staff of Senator Johnson's office. And Senator Johnson says he doesn't know what was in it, but that he was asked to hand it up to the vice president.
Carol has just handed me the reports off the wires right now on the abortion case, Stuart. And apparently Chief Justice John Roberts voted with the majority, but he said he would have taken a more measured course to stop overruling Roe outright. It was a 6-3 vote.
So Chief Justice Roberts wrote a concurring opinion and indicated he would have preferred a more narrow approach. And indeed, the Supreme Court has historically endeavored to take the most narrow approach possible in deciding any case of constitutional import. The Supreme Court historically has abhorred overbroad changes in the law. So they could have decided the case on the case's merits and limited it very narrowly. They didn't, because this was the opportunity to finally overrule Roe versus Wade, and we'll just have to see what happens. One point I will make is I will yell and scream at the top of my lungs to Democrats. You have to understand, like apparently Republican voters do, that putting a Democrat in the White House matters. It's the most important thing that president does is appoint justices of the Supreme Court who can serve for 30 or 40 years. And when you do not get out and ensure that your party wins the presidency, you leave to chance something like this that will impact the country, impact women for the next 20, 30 years or more. And that is why, frankly, even if I like a Republican, when it comes to president, I will never abandon my party. The significance of the Supreme Court just cannot be overstated. And I think Republican voters understand that. Democratic voters don't seem to understand that. But going back to this sealed envelope, of course, I don't believe that Senator Johnson didn't know what was in it, but there was a text from Vice President Pence's office to Senator Johnson's chief of staff that says, do not give that to the vice president. Very emphatically. And so the envelope was never handed to the vice president. Now, what would have been the significance if it had? Well, one of the arguments that's been made is that there were no alternate slates of electors. So Vice President Pence's role was simply to open the votes and announce the count. But if an alternate slate of delegates had been presented to the Congress, to the vice president, things would have ground to a halt, which is what President Trump desired. And Vice President Pence would have been faced with either deciding that it was clear that one slate of delegates was fake, let's say the new one that he just got, because it wasn't certified by any state official, throwing it out and still allowing the original electoral votes to be counted. Or if Vice President Pence didn't say outright that it's clear that this one is fraudulent, then he has two in front of him, and he either has to pick one, and his decision is final if he picks one, or he has to say we need to send it back to the states. That would have put the count on hold. Precisely what the president wanted. Buy him more time to pursue any of his theories, any of his mechanisms to get his way. The fact that that envelope was not handed up is very significant in our constitutional history because it prevented a crisis. And this shows all the different ways that President Trump was endeavoring to change the results of the election. Now, I will tell you that there were theories that I heard about yesterday that, as others have said, in a lot higher power than I have, not only bordered on the absurd, but on lunacy. For example, President Trump wanted investigated the theory that, which country was it? Oh, Italy.
Yeah, they were Italian spacecrafts there.
Right,
huh?
that Italian, that from Italy, there was an effort to, or that they were actually sending instructions to satellites that would change votes from Biden to Trump. I mean, from Trump to Biden. And he wanted that investigated. Lasers to the satellites and back. Then,
By the way, I called the Italian government this morning, and they're taping this show on the satellites.
well, better yet, after that didn't work, China, there was a theory, the president wanted investigated, that China was controlling votes and changing them from Trump to Biden using electronic thermostats. Now, I don't know, how do thermostats change voting machines? That is, gosh. I mean, and when he was told that that was without basis, and asked how he came to believe that, there is a text from President Trump that says, well, I guess you're not on the internet as much as I am. So these were conspiracy theories from the far reaches of the internet. I guess the space landing was fake too. And there are people that believe that. There are people that still believe the world is flat.
It isn't?
I guess it depends which party's in office. Maybe if it's round, the idea is to, make all the Democrats fall off of it.
Yeah, and the space landing was in the Warner Brothers Chatsworth studio.
So let me sort of try to start talking about a little bit of psychology. Now, I don't have a psychology degree. I'm not a psychologist. My son is the expert. He has a psychology degree from IRSC and is going to Nova in 2 months for a bachelor's degree and then a master's and hopefully a PhD after that. But there are some theories, because they intersect with trial lawyers in particular, that I am familiar with. And there are theories as to why people still don't believe what is coming out of these congressional hearings. And indeed, as more and more information comes out that shows the cheater that Trump was, the threat to democracy that he truly was, as, for example, testimony from former Attorney General Bill Barr and even Trump's daughter, Ivanka, about the election, it's caused a schism for some of Trump's supporters in that they have to reassert their views as to whether the former president was correct in his false theory of victory. Now, Barr's testimony that Trump repeatedly was told that there was no election fraud, that Ivanka Trump said she didn't believe that either, that she believed that the Attorney General had concluded. There's a theory that that was all part of Trump's grand plan to confuse. Why might he want to confuse? Or why might voters simply not want to believe the new information? Well, there are two related psychological theories. One is selective listening, and one is called cognitive dissonance. They're both similar, but different. Selective hearing is like, if you're a parent, have you ever had to say to your kid, I told you to take out the garbage 2 hours ago. What do you have, selective hearing? You hear the things you want, you don't hear the things you don't want? I think we've all had that experience.
That was my entire school career.
Cognitive dissonance is the refusal to reevaluate one's views when presented with conflicting information. Indeed, it's not just a refusal to accept and reevaluate, it is almost, and sometimes, a refusal to even hear it. Now, that doesn't mean you literally can't hear it. It means you hear it, but it's like white noise. Your brain does not process it. It refuses to process it. Cognitive dissonance in this situation was described as a crack which supporters had to fill once Attorney General Barr and Ivanka Trump made their statements that there was no election fraud. Well, if you still believed, if you were a supporter of Donald Trump, and now you have the Attorney General and the daughter saying it's not true, now you have a crack. And we all know that cracks need to be filled in. And the question becomes, how do we fill them in? There are several ways that, I won't go into this because these are different straws that were grasped at, and I think we're way past that. So let's describe cognitive dissonance. It is described as the mental process of acquiring knowledge and understanding through thought, reason, analysis of information, and experience. That's cognition. Dissonance is a musical term that means a lack of harmony among musical notes, but also means a tension or clash that results from disharmonious or contradictory components. In other words, facts that are being presented. In psychology, cognitive dissonance is the mental discomfort experienced by a person who simultaneously holds two or more contradictory beliefs, ideas, or values. The discomfort is triggered by a situation in which a person's belief clashes with new evidence introduced. Now, to reduce that psychological discomfort, the person will have to either change their mind or their behavior so that the inconsistency or contradiction is resolved, thus restoring mental balance and emotional harmony. That's cognitive consonance. Dissonance is the process by which they reject or ignore the contradictory information. Now, there are several ways that people reduce their mental tension when their behavior and their available information clash, called dissonance reduction. So, to reduce cognitive dissonance, a person can either change their behavior or belief so that it's congruent with the new information. For example, oh, I see how the president tried to falsely claim that the election was stolen. I now see through all his efforts to undo the results and all the detailed actions that he tried to formulate and all the information that was consistently given to him. So I'm going to take all this new information and I'm now going to say, you know, I no longer am a Trump supporter. I no longer agree with him. And I'm certainly not going to vote for him next time around if he runs. That's one way of resolving the cognitive dissonance. But another way is to simply ignore or deny the conflicting information. For example, I hear all this information. I'm even watching the hearings, but I don't believe any of this is true. I believe this is some show that the Democrats are putting on. In fact, I don't even think there are real hearings. I think it's just been made up by the media. And this is all a play. You can do that and, you know, talk away all the conflicting information that you've been given and continue to believe in Trump, you know, to the bitter end. Now, I was reading one article, I'm going to quote a little bit from it. It says, as a currently relevant example, consider that incontrovertible proof has been discovered that Donald Trump has lied, cheated, stolen, and committed very serious crimes that most people would face significant jail time for. What's more, he has implemented policies that are hurting many people who voted for him. Nevertheless, a great many people who voted for Trump vigorously defend their choice, despite the tremendous amount of credible, incriminating information about him that has come to light since 2020. Information that, had they been aware of before then, might have dissuaded some from adopting Trump's position. Now, ideally, we would all be rational beings who consistently adjusted their beliefs, attitudes, and behaviors to align with new information that is essentially incontrovertible. But we humans are not rational creatures, and many people are unwilling to change their worldview to account for new information that contradicts their cherished beliefs. Indeed, they reduce dissonance by justifying their outlook rather than by changing their minds or behaviors. And that, I believe, explains what is happening now. And what has happened, frankly, since 2016. You know, it seemed like almost every day we'd have a news report about something that Donald Trump had said or done or tweeted. And we would be shocked and we would think, okay, his supporters in Congress can't believe this. They can't follow this. His supporters out in the citizenry, they're going to change their minds about him. It didn't happen. We'd hear something else, and we'd think the same thing. I did. And even through the impeachment, I kept saying, now they've got to realize what they've got and throw him out of office. Obviously, I was completely wrong. The second impeachment, where they could have thrown him out of office and prevented him from running again, thus eliminating his power over them. This was their chance to end his power and influence. Of course, they're going to take it. What have they got to lose? Nope. With a couple of exceptions, they stood strong and they all voted against impeachment. Why? What was the fear of senators if they were going to convict him, impeach him and convict him, and then vote separately that he may no longer hold federal office? What power would he have had over them? What fear that they're still showing these days? You know, he's putting up primary candidates against people. You know, he's seeking his vengeance, but he's better and able to do it because he's still viewed as the leader of the Republican Party. So if you cross him, you know he has the power and influence to destroy you. But if he had been convicted in the Senate at least a second time, that wouldn't be true. So why didn't they take it? And so I stopped wondering, when would the Republicans come to a realization? And I almost stopped thinking, at some point, voters are going to change their minds and realize what's going on. And if only a quarter of them do that, then he's never going to be able to be elected again. We all need all of them to do it, maybe a quarter of them. And it still is not happening. So what is the explanation for the rabbit hole that Donald Trump has on everybody that are supporters of his? One of the ways to explain it is cognitive dissonance. And as trial lawyers, we use this theory in attempting to persuade juries. And we try to present more than just facts, because facts alone are not necessarily going to change somebody's mind. In fact, if the facts you present are contrary to what they already believe, they may literally not even hear it. Their brain may not process it. You've said something 5 times during a trial, yet the jury comes back against you. You know, what? They never heard you. You had to do something else to try to persuade them. And part of that something else is appealing to their emotional side, appealing to their hearts in a way that is not false, but gets through the noise. And let's take a call from Gina from Port St. Lucie. Hi, Gina.
Hi, Stuart. I was calling about eviction and for non-payment. And
Yes.
also, if they move somebody else in that is not on the lease.
You're asking, can you evict somebody if a tenant moves somebody else in who's not on the lease?
Correct. And also, they're not making payments on the rent now.
Okay. Well, if the lease says that the only occupants may be those who are on the lease, then the answer is yes. You can seek to evict for having somebody living there that's not on the lease. First, you'd have to give them a notice to cure, and then if they didn't cure, you can move forward with an eviction action. As far as non-payment of rent, again, you have to give them a statutory notice, and at least the first time, give them an opportunity to cure, and then you can file an eviction action, and either they're going to deposit the back rent in the registry of the court, or the court will not even hear them. They will simply, within a couple weeks, issue a writ of eviction. Does that answer your question?
That's something you do, or?
Yes. Yes, we do that. We handle evictions for landlords.
I'm sorry.
You know, if you're interested, certainly give my office a call, and we'll start you talking with my paralegal, and then she'll discuss your facts with me, and I'll get back to you as to whether or not we're able to help you.
Okay.
All right? Thank you for calling. Okay. Well, hopefully my office will get a call. And when it comes to one's effort, let's say, to persuade a jury, you can give them all the facts, but the equivalent to trying to go to the emotional side would be what happened in Tuesday's hearing, when the Georgia poll worker and her mother were presented and gave testimony about how devastating it was for Donald Trump to come after them personally and have the power of the presidency, alleging that they were frauds and they were fixing the election. Mother's house was broken into. The daughter has left her job as a person who registers voters in Atlanta, and no longer works right now at all, because she's still too terrified. She doesn't want people to see her. She doesn't want to go to the grocery store, have somebody call out her name. She just doesn't want to be noticed. She wants to be small. And I had a client like that. I had a client who, after having a dentist brandish a gun at a staff meeting, went home and went into her master bedroom closet, which was a walk-in closet, sit in the corner, and essentially lived there for over a week, according to her husband, because she was afraid that the dentist was going to follow her home and try to kill her. Now, that may be extreme, but it's real. And what the Georgia workers were testifying to, even the mama, was the impact that an attack on them by the president is capable of having. That was a truthful, emotional presentation designed to break through the noise and help the facts be heard. And we have Charlie again on one of the lines.
Yes, hi,
Hey,
Stuart.
Charlie.
I didn't hear about that Georgia situation. That certainly is horrible. What I wanted to say is earlier you talked about Roe v. Wade, et cetera. It would go back to the states to make a decision, so abortion would still be available. And the two people that are Republicans that are sitting on that January 6th committee, Cheney is one, and the other, and then
Are heroes.
they both voted to impeach.
That's right, and they are heroes.
That's
They
right.
held to their oath and decided that the Constitution was more important than their party. Kinzinger is not running again, and Cheney knows she is going to lose. In her primary, I think she's 30 points behind right now. They are giving up their careers to do this.
Yeah. Well, let me get off the air so I can hear you better.
All right. I'm sorry, it just doesn't cut it to say that, you know, Cheney and Kinzinger voted for impeachment. Yeah, they did, to their credit. And they're willing to serve on the committee despite being threatened by Minority Leader McCarthy, despite being stripped of all their committee responsibilities, being basically labeled with a scarlet T for traitor, and told to go sit in the corner. Yet they're going to go down in flames. Their political careers are ending, at least for now. And that was worth the price of adhering to the oath they took to protect and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. I can't respect them enough. I may disagree with them on political policies, but I cannot respect them enough for the stand they took. And by the way, these Acting Attorney General Rosen and his deputy Donahue, and there was another guy there who was from the Office of Legal Counsel in the Department of Justice, and I forget his name. They were all career conservative Republican lawyers. Conservative Republican. They were put in their positions by Donald Trump. Yet they withstood the most horrific of pressure campaigns. Several meetings that went on for hours in the Oval Office where Trump would try to pressure them to come around to what he wanted them to do. And indeed, it only ended because in a meeting on January 3rd, I believe it was, Trump says to them, to Rosen, well, why shouldn't I replace you and replace Donahue with Clark, who will do what I want, and send out those letters to the state legislators and say that there's evidence of voter fraud Why shouldn't I just fire the two of you? And both of those attorneys responded, you can do that. You can fire me right now. You have the right to do that. I serve at the pleasure of the president. However, if you do that, not only am I gone, Mr. Donahue is going to resign, and other leadership in the Department of Justice is going to resign, and most of the U.S. attorneys that lead the various offices throughout the country are going to resign. And so you will have your Clark, but he has no experience in criminal law. He's an environmental lawyer. He doesn't know how to lead a department. He doesn't know how to conduct an investigation like this. And he'll be leading a graveyard because there'll be nobody there. And you will look foolish. And it was that last part that got Trump to not proceed with the plan of firing Rosen and Donahue, and making Clark acting attorney general. He did not want to look so bad with mass resignations that he was playing the role of a fool. I could hear Mr. T right now. And that is what stopped another aspect of the constitutional crisis. And so, again, if we did not have these Republicans truly believe in their heart of hearts that my oath to the Constitution is more important than my job. If I lose my job, I lose my job. But if I do what the president asks, we may lose the country. You know, our history is full of heroes. And history will write who the heroes were during this part of our history. And there will be heroes large and small, all of them heroes in their own way. And there will be villains, large and small. And as Congresswoman Cheney had said to her fellow colleagues, be careful, because history will record with disdain your dishonor. And I believe that to be true, that history will judge the Republicans in Congress as having been derelict in duty and having been active in activities that could have led to the end of the Republic. You know, every single country in the history of the world, except those that presently exist, has come to an end at some point. Rome came to an end. Greece came to an end. Soviet Union came to an end. There is nothing that prevents the United States of America from having the same fate and coming to an end. The only thing that prevents that are people who value the Constitution more than they value their party or their jobs. That people who are of goodwill, common sense, people who truly go into office, local and national, out of a sincere desire to accomplish something positive for their constituents and who are not corrupted by the lure of power. For as has been said, power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. And that's what Donald Trump was seeking. Absolute power. And so while I hope that these two hearings of this week have persuaded some who were formerly Trump supporters, I wonder to what extent that's true, or whether cognitive dissonance is simply going to prevent that from happening. These are the things that are going on in our country. They relate to politics and they relate to law. And as for the Roe v. Wade decision, I pray for the country. I pray for all the women who are going to have difficulty obtaining abortions. And I pray that reason overtakes this decision very soon. I'm Stuart Address for Ask a Lawyer. Thank you for listening. I'll be back next week. Have a good week. Thank you.
WSTU Stewart, WPSL Port St. Lucie.